Hello and welcome back. So in this lecture, we're going to touch on a subject that we haven't covered in the course yet. For this, we're going to need the knowledge of two major things. One of those things is knowledge of Active Directory. Now, since this is out of the aspect for this course, we will not be covering what Active Directory is or how it works. So I do recommend for you to go and read about it, or just to get the basic knowledge so you can follow along through this challenge that we're going to go through in this lecture. So I recommend going onto the Microsoft website because all of the documentation and all of the definition and structure of Active Directory can be found here. You just type in Active Directory, you click on any of these links and you start reading about it. Now, this is a lot of things to read, so you don't really have to do that. You can just go and Google on some other website that gives more plain and simple explanation of Active Directory, what it is and how it works, and that should be enough for this lecture. The second thing that we need is a TryHackMe account. So in my bug bounty course, I do cover the TryHackMe platform, but for this course, I think we're encountering it for the first time. So go ahead, create an account on the TryHackMe platform. And once you create an account, there is one more thing that you should do, and that is to connect to their VPN so you can access their virtual machines that are used for practice. So for this particular lecture, we're going to cover the Active Directory challenge. Now you can find the Active Directory challenge at this link right here, so tryhackme.com, room, and then /Active Directory. Once you go there, you will also have a simple explanation here on how you can deploy the machine that we're going to be targeting, as well as how you can connect to their VPN. So to connect to their VPN, just follow along this small tutorial under the task number 1. And you should be connected to the OpenVPN at the end of this task. As you can see right here, I downloaded my VPN configuration file and I used sudo openvpn to open and run this configuration file. So you will need to use sudo. Once you do that, let me lower this. We no longer need this window. You should have their IP address. If you type ifconfig and scroll all the way down, there will be another interface turning up with an IP address for this VPN. Okay, awesome. Once we do that, we're ready to get started with attacking this machine. So we're strictly going to focus on completing these challenges right here that we are provided. So we're not going to mention some other different ways that certain things can be done. We just want to complete this task. So for the first task, which is setting up the machine and the VPN, there is nothing really that we need to do. But once we do that, we can just click on Start Machine, and our machine or our target machine will be started and its IP address will be shown in 1 minute. The machine expires in about 1 hour, but you can always click on Add 1 hour if you haven't finished everything, or you can just terminate the machine and restart it again. Okay, so once we finish the first task, we're ready to go on to the second task, which is setup. Now, for this, I already finished all of these things, but you will need to do it installing Impacket. So it does give you commands and the tools that you will need to install certain things that this challenge requires. So for example, you need to git clone the impacket.git and it will be stored in the /opt/impacket. Another thing that you need to do is install the requirements for the Impacket with pip3, and you need to run the setup.py file once you complete these two commands. So just follow along, read through all of this, follow along the commands that you need to execute for this challenge. And in case you encounter some issues, there is also different commands here that might work instead. And once you're done with the Impacket, you also want to install Bloodhound and Neo4j with the command provided down below. It might require sudo, I don't really remember, but give it a try without and with sudo. If you have issues, always perform apt update and apt upgrade first and then redo the installation of these packages. Okay, once that is done, we are ready for the first real task, which is enumeration. So you will notice that right here I have some of the tasks completed, but we're just going to ignore that and we're going to pretend as if we're restarting this from the beginning. Okay, so enumeration. Welcome to Active Directory. Now, here is the introduction, and here is the part that explains why enumeration should be done first and which tools we can use to complete the enumeration part. So right here we have several questions that we need to answer, and some of them are already answered, but don't mind that at the moment. And let's go with the first task. So let's read through this real quick. Basic enumeration starts out with an Nmap scan. Nmap is a relatively complex utility that has been refined over the years to detect what ports are open on a device, what services are running, and even detect what operating system is it running. It's important to note that not all services may be detected correctly and not enumerated to its fullest potential. Despite Nmap being an overly complex utility, it cannot enumerate everything. Therefore, after an initial Nmap scan, we'll be using other utilities to help us enumerate the devices or the services running on the device. Okay, we have some notes here that will be used for later. And the three questions that we get in this part of the task is what tool will allow us to enumerate port 139 and 445. What is the NetBIOS domain name of the machine, and what invalid TLD, or TLD is also known as top-level domain, do people commonly use for their Active Directory domain? Okay, so as our task told us, the first approach will be to run a simple Nmap scan, which we can do by typing Nmap, and then we just paste the IP address given to us right here and press enter. So this is the basic Nmap scan. We're not using any other options, and we'll just get several ports open. Now, based on these ports, we can already assume that this target is running an Active Directory, since we see NetBIOS, we see Kerberos, we see LDAP. All these ports can indicate an Active Directory. Now, if we want to check the versions, we already know that we can run the -sv scan, and this will deploy the versions, or this will output the versions of softwares running on these open ports. Okay, so we can see all of it right here, and here under this service on the LDAP we can already see the first answer to the third question right here, which is what invalid top-level domain do people commonly use for their Active Directory domain, and the answer is .local. We got .local right here outputted, so if you paste it here, it will be the correct answer. But before that, since this is the third question, just don't mind it at the moment. We did get the output of it in the SV scan, but let's answer the second question first. What is the NetBIOS domain name of the machine? So here we really don't get the output for that, but there are several tools that we can use to get the output. One of those tools is enum for Linux. If you just type enum for Linux and you paste the IP address, it will perform several different tasks or checks, including trying to discover the NetBIOS domain name of the machine. So it will take several seconds for it to finish. So let's wait for that. Okay, so we can Control-C this. We don't need it to run any longer. We got what we searched for. So the NetBIOS domain name we can find, or we can read it right from here. So here are the accounts on the Active Directory, and thm-ad would be the domain name. And we can also read it up here. It already got outputted to us before, which is right here. Domain name thm-ad. So if you copy this, you paste it right here, it will be the correct answer. And what tool will allow us to enumerate port 139.445? We can use Enum for Linux, but it is not the only tool that can be used. This thm-ad can also be discovered with MSF console. So let me show you, there is a module, the auxiliary module, that can be used to also get the domain name once we input the target IP. So let's just wait for the MSF console to open up, and the auxiliary module that we want to use is the SMB version. We might have already used it before in the course, but right now we're going to use it for the purposes of enumerating a active directory. Okay, so the MSF console opened up and we want to go use auxiliary. We want to go scanner. First go scanner, then SMB and SMB version. So show options will give us all the input fields that we need to provide, and the only one is our hosts, which we can just paste like this. And if I type run, it should work, and in the output we should get the domain name that we are asked for in the enumeration phase. And here it is, authentication domain thm-ad. So it's also another tool that can be used to discover the domain name. Okay, awesome. Now that we covered the first part of the enumeration, now let's go to the enumerating users via Kerberos. So if you read through the Microsoft documentation that I provided you for the Active Directory, you will also encounter something called Kerberos, and we do get a little bit of a definition right here. So a whole host of other services are running, including Kerberos. Kerberos is a key authentication service within Active Directory. And after this definition, it does provide us with a little bit of a hint of how we can approach this challenge. And with this port open, and we saw the Kerberos running on an open port, we can use a tool called Kerbrute to brute force directory of users, passwords, and even perform password spraying. And here's a little note. Several users have informed me that the latest version of Kerbrute does not contain the user enum flag in Kerbrute. If that is the case with the version you have selected, try an older version. So just a quick note right here. And enumeration. So for this challenge, we will need a modified user list and a password list, which will be used to cut down on time of enumeration of users and passwords hash cracking. Alright, so 3 things we're going to need for this part of the challenge. We're going to need Kerbrute, so just click on this link, open in a different tab so you can download the tool. And you also want to download the user list and the password list, which you can also open in a different tab and download it from there. Now I've already downloaded all 3. As you can see, I have Kerbrute right here, I have the users and the password list right here. So simply just save the user list and the password list and you will get these 2 txt files. And Kerbrute tool can be downloaded from GitHub if we go right here. And here you will have the versions depending on which operating system you're running. We want Linux AMD 64, and you can download it, or you can see the download or installation process by deleting the releases and going to just the Kerbrute page or the Kerbrute official page. You could have also clicked right here probably, and here if I scroll all the way down, we will see the usage, and we will also see the installation guide, which tells us how we can install Kerbrute. Okay, again back to our challenge or to our Active Directory, and once it loads up, let's see which questions do we get in this part of the challenge. Okay, let's go down, once again enumerating, and the 3 questions are already answered, but let's see how did we come up with these solutions. And the first one is, what command with Kerbrute will allow us to enumerate valid usernames? So once you download Kerbrute, let's exit the MSF console, Yeah, this is the command to exit Python, not MSF console, so let's do it properly. We go to desktop or wherever you have your KRBRUT downloaded, and you change the directory to the KRBRUT. If you compiled it the way that is shown on the GitHub installation page, then in the dist directory, you will have all the executable files. Now I deleted the rest since the only one that we need is KRBRUT Linux AMD 64. Now to just run it, we can type /KRBRUT and just press enter. It will give us the help menu for this tool. Now it is asked what command within KRBRUT will allow us to enumerate valid usernames, and already here under the available commands we can see user enum, which will enumerate valid domain usernames via Kerberos, so we can already specify it right here without even running the command first. But let's see, since for the other two questions we will need to run that command. Let's do it like this. To run it properly, and let me just move this a little bit up. To run it properly, you want to type KRBRUT, or the executable name, and then user enum. Then -d will be the domain, as we can see right here. And we saw in the first part that the domain given, or the full domain given, is spookysec.local. Remember when we provided a .local under the first enumeration part? Well, this is the first or the full domain to our target, and we can also specify the IP address by using --dc. And we should also see that option somewhere, or is it in... Okay, here it is. --dc is the location of the domain controller to target. So if it is left blank, if it's not specified, it will look this up on or over DNS. So here essentially we want to copy the IP address and paste it right here. And since we are provided with user and password lists, we can use the user list to enumerate users. All we have to do is type in users.txt, but let me just see if it's in the same directory. It's not in the same directory, so we have to specify the full path: home Mr. Hacker, desktop, users.txt, or pretty much wherever you have it saved, just specify the full path to the users file, and if I press enter, it will output all the users that it managed to find. As we can see, valid username for James, SVC admin, and it also has something interesting right here, which we will talk about in just a second, and there are other valid usernames such as administrator, which will also be interesting later on, and the backup, which will certainly be interesting later on. So let's answer these questions right here. What notable account is discovered? These should jump at you. The first thing that we see is SVC admin, and why is it? Well, that's because it's the only one that outputted the entire hash right here for us to see. So that's the first account that is discovered, and that is notable and interesting to us. Now we will see what we can do with this hash later on, but let's specify SVC admin as an result right here. What is the other notable account that is discovered? Well, it's definitely backup, since it's not that common to see it, but administrator would also be a decent answer, because administrator is always something that we are targeting, but it is a normal account to see on Active Directory, whether it being administrator or root or anything like that. It's a must to have on Active Directory, so we're just going to go with backup as the other notable account that is discovered, since it can be interesting for us. Now, once you answer these two questions, you can close this tool, no need for it to run anymore. And in the next lecture, we're going to see how useful this will be for us in the exploitation phase of this challenge. See you in the next lecture.